Heyo everybody, Haku here with my read-through for the first half of Chapter 6 of Magical Girl Raising Project, or Mahou shoujo Ikusei Keikaku, JOKERS, Chapter 6, the end. So, we're on the last chapter already. I thought about different ways to break this up, but I'm just going to do it in two videos, because as I look through, the way I always do it, I never look at any of the headers so I don't spoil myself, but I look for where those, thick lines are in the story to see where the page breaks are. In the one that goes to the epilogue, I think, is it page 30 out of 59 or something like that? 57 pages. So I'm just going to read through everything but the epilogue here, so we get the actual end of the story here. And then I'll do the epilogue for the next video, and I'll probably also look at, there's something here called what is it? It was Princess Quake's sketchbook, I think. So I'm going to look at that next video too. And probably cry if it's feelsy, but we'll see what happens. I wonder how sad this is going to be. So to discuss it a little bit before getting into reading the last chapter here, we have half the cast left still in the last chapter. Now we still had a lot of girls left in the end of, in the end of Limited, but the ending of Limited was nonsense with a lot of deaths that were really pointless and not very well written. But JOKERS has been really, really good, so I'm not really expecting that at all out of JOKERS because of how good it's been. So let's see who's left and what I think their outcomes might be. As far as the people who we've lost all the pure elements except for Deluge, including Prism Cherry. So that's 4 of the 8 down, and then the other 4 are the 2 freelancers other than Filaru, which would be Utakata and Kafuria, and we also lost both Lady Proud and Umbrain, which is kind of interesting because it seemed like their story was kind of really connected to what was going on in the overall Land of Magic stuff, but we killed both of them off, and there's nobody with the same kind of connection to what was going on with their story. So that's going to be something that this arc isn't necessarily solving, that if we get any more of that, it's going to have to be in the future arcs to get any more things related to them, really. In addition to that, the ones we have left, we've got Ripple and this old lady and Pithy Frederica getting involved somehow, and I am kind of hoping that Stunt Chica is just Stunt Chica. She's her own person, but she could be Ripple, she could be Pithy, she could be a number of people. She could be Mana potentially, or even Nanako-san, though I doubt that. So there's all of that going on. I kind of hope Stunt Chica is just Stunt Chica, because the epilogue for last chapter was a bit confusing, but what it seemed like was that that Pithy pulled somebody out of a situation to save their life, and for most of the ones we've seen dead, we've seen them die, except Stunt Chica supposedly blew herself up, but we never saw a body there. So I feel like Stunt Chica's probably the one she pulled out, and whoever she pulled out told her that they needed to go back to save their friends, and Pithy was like, I didn't want you to die, to save the hair, but I'm going to let you be an ideal magical girl and save your friends. So I really hope that's Stunt Chica and that she is her own character, because that would be a really, really good story, that she could have escaped, but she's like, I'm not escaping without all the rest of my friends. So we have Stunt Chica, who I'm counting as alive right now, because I believe that's the one that Pithy saved. Whether she is somebody in disguise or not, I'm pretty sure that's the one that was saved. So I'm counting her as alive. We've got the 2 bad guys, Shufflin and Shufflin, who just restocked as well, and Grimheart. Now I think there's going to be multiple Shufflin JOKERS because there are multiple JOKERS in a deck. I don't know if there's 2 of them or 4. I think there's 2. So I think there's going to be a good Shufflin and an evil Shufflin. So there's a potential that we might see the good Shufflin here, and she could actually help the good guys defeat the evil Shufflin. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. And in addition to that, there are 5 more good guy magical girls still alive, which would be Snow White, who, I didn't say whether I thought they'd live or die. Stunt Chica could go either way. Since she's coming back to save her friends and escape with them, she could live, she could die, I'm not quite sure. It depends on who she is, if she is someone in a disguise or if she is just Stunt Chica. I actually think that Shufflin could die. The bad Shufflin, at least. Or at least this Shufflin. I think she could die. I think that Snow White could kill her to kind of... Even though Snow White killing people isn't really typically her thing, she hunts them and keeps them alive, really, to capture them. I think Snow White could potentially kill her, or maybe one of the other good guy characters do. Or even the good Shufflin comes in and kills her. But I think that Shufflin could possibly die here, at least this Shufflin Joker. Grimheart, I think, is going to live, though. Because I could see her, the next one's called Aces, the one after that is Queens. That has to do with decks of cards, so it feels like Shufflin would be alive. But I feel like Grimheart could survive into Queens. We know she's a big, important person in the Land of Magic, so it would make sense for her to be a bigger villain to carry on into future arcs. I think Grimheart could survive because of that. As for the good guys, there's Snow White, who I think is totally surviving, at least for this arc. Who knows if in future arcs we might lose Snow White, but I feel pretty strongly she's surviving this arc. Princess Deluge, all the others are dead, and I was kind of saying there needs to be at least one man-made magical girl to survive. I kind of thought Deluge was the most likely, but maybe Inferno. But now that we've lost Inferno, Deluge has to be the one, so I'm feeling pretty safe that she'll stay alive. Filuru, sadly. Filuru I want to live so much, and that makes me think she's going to die, so I actually don't have very high hopes for Filuru making it. And then lastly are Marika and Styler Mimi, and they could each go either way. I could see both of them living, I could see both of them dying, I could see one living and one dying. I really like both of them, but they're really 50-50 right now. Sorry there's a long discussion, but I know some of you like the discussion bits, but I thought it was important before going into the last chapter to bring all this up. So, I guess let's see what happens. We have half the cast left, let's see what happens to them. We have Chapter 6, The Magical Girl Hunt, and we're starting with Grimheart. Grimheart had to move carefully. She's lost her stock of magical girls, not to mention her supply of experimental bodies. She has to be able to capture and not kill the last experimental body, and has to be able to launch a strategy without replenishing Shufflin. No matter how she thinks of it, this was humiliating. Originally, it should have been as easy as a giant stepping on an ant, but this was like the ants were swerving left and right, or if they bit back and resisted. All this time, they've adopted Joker's plans, and they've all backfired. Overall, it was Joker's fault. Grimheart was too generous. Without thinking too hard, she adopted her vassal strategies, therefore it failed. This time, things will be different. Grimheart would be taking command. If the army was incompetent, then the king would lead. In olden times, it was rare for a king to hold a sword and go to war personally, but there were also kings that led their armies from the front lines. Now, how should I attack? She wondered as she retrieved a report. The mist in the water area is clearing up. Oh? They were wise to fog the room. The barbarians were smart enough to obscure their vision from the monitors. Furthermore, using the water gathered up from the room, they created a flash flood that wasted many of Grimheart's Shufflin. It was too late for them to notice that they've been placed in a difficult position to attack. Even if they did, they were still holding down the ground. Now, the mist was gone. Did an accident happen? There, she saw one person among all of them, tied up and rolled. Oh, because at the end, Deluge offered to, not really be bait, but be a hostage to hand over for their freedom. I don't think they're getting freedom either way, and I don't think any of them are dumb enough to believe that either, so this is probably a trap. Tied up and rolled. All the magical girls looked up toward the monitor cameras. One of the magical girls brought her hands closer to her mouth and shouted, "If you can guarantee our safety, we'll give you this man-made magical girl. We have other conditions, and we'd like you to send a representative to negotiate." Grimheart tilted her head. What are they doing? It's a bit hard to hear what they're saying, but they've captured the experimental body and wish to negotiate. Oh, they finally know their place. No, saying that would be premature. Why? They're inviting us to a negotiation spot. They may suddenly attack. Barbarians are shameless. Certainly. Barbarians would be the kind of people who would do something like that. What Joker said was correct. Then, should we leave the room for trading? If we tried to assault them, or at worst the experimental body would be killed. That would be bad. How do we handle this? We need to make conditions so that they don't suddenly attack us. Grimheart thought about the possibility of it being a trap. The possibility of it being a trap is high. Barbarians are shameless without exception. They are not to be trusted. They can't even build trust either way. So really, Grimheart could just take one of the shuffling bodies with her to translate, and if they attacked, then the only one who would be hurt would be the shuffling body. But either way. Okay, if it's a trap, so be it. They'll just have to make it so their situation will crush any attempts of trapping. No matter how much of a trap they'll set, she will never raise the white flag or beg to them. We can't possibly negotiate with the Shufflins, can we? They can't even speak. All they could do is mediate. I won't allow you to go either. If I get killed, the Shufflins will die. I feel the enemy's leading us to this conclusion. Then you're saying I will have to go? My deepest apologies. Grimheart tapped her mouth. Would there be any inconvenience caused by Grimheart going out to negotiate? Unlike Joker, she was able to cancel out any effects from magic and any possible injuries. Would there be any other inconveniences? If there were, she'd disable them. I have no problems with myself negotiating. First, we'll have to choose our negotiator and location. The briefing room would be out of the question. Furthermore, the magical girl hunter cannot be the one trading. If we negotiate with her, she'll find our weak points. That is to say, she'll steal the password. I do not know what that beast Mark Fukuroi is like, but I feel we'd be seriously injured if she was nominated as a trading partner. The needle and thread magical girl is perfect. I believe her name was Filaru. I shan't neglect my monitoring. While you negotiate them, my liege, they may choose to attack the briefing room. They are shameless that way. What if the experimental body negotiated herself? No, that is to say, they won't want to let the experimental body negotiate by herself. As senior, I have the right to choose who I speak to. However, Joker said that they won't negotiate if you do. Grimheart wouldn't be able to respond if that was the case, and she always had to respond. It was annoying to let the savages ride her around. She'll clear out her rage later as well. We'll designate the location here, and also designate who will negotiate. We'll also have a strict body exam for the negotiator. We'll ensure that they're not hiding explosives or weapons. Then, we'll negotiate at as far a distance as possible, a distance where they won't even be able to spit toward you. We'll attach escort shufflins as well. We'll ensure that no blade touch you, my liege. You know what would be awesome, though? If Stunt Chica is somebody in disguise, if Stunt Chica was the good Joker, that would be insanity. Because she does have kind of like that sort of design with the clown style, but whatever. Annoying. If you refuse, then they may kill the experimental body. Negotiating is a queen's duty. You cannot do a hostage negotiation without the head of the VIP with you. Then, we won't waste any more time. Grimheart stood up from her throne and headed to the summit of the barbarians. Alright? Now I've got some water before we see from Shufflin's point of view. And in general, Shufflin is just really one of the most, how do I put it, one of the most creative and interesting characters I think that's been in any of these so far. And I think that's, again, it is named JOKERS after her, but Shufflin has really carried this arc for me in a lot of ways. Then again, Snow White has been really a force as a character this arc. Same with a lot of the pure elements, but either way, Filaru's been great, Mimi's been great, but either way, moving along. We have Shufflin's point of view. As Grimheart left the briefing room, she brought the fire of her anger with her, making the room quiet. The only one who would spontaneously talk was always Grimheart. The Heart Shufflin would probably shout if they were scared, but Joker was always able to control them. Joker took her eyes off the monitor. She was about to ensure the briefing room was held well. Following Joker's instructions, first the Hearts began moving. They grabbed a flagpole with a tapestry as proof they were messengers, then headed for the water room. The rod of the flagpole was made of a converted spear. The tapestry holding 7 of hearts pushed the panel into the water room. Although they were surrounded by magical girls with weapons, their opponents had no intention of fighting. Naturally, neither did they. The 7 of Hearts was able to enter the room. However, since they couldn't speak, all they can do is repeat the words that they were taught to say. They were told to find Filuru. They were told to bend their fingers while placing their palms horizontally. Okay? That was how you beckoned someone to come. They couldn't understand what their opponents were saying, however they were taught to keep repeating until their opponent came closer to them. They pointed at Filuru, then beckoned her to come repeatedly. Joker taught them never to diverge from this. Joker switched monitors with the forest room. Alright. Grimheart was sitting on her throne in the front of the door leading to the briefing room. The Shufflins waiting on her had high fighting capabilities, the highest ranked spades aside from the ace, and the highest numbered clubs. The ace of spades was beside Joker. Though it was important to escort Grimheart, she wasn't keen on letting her leave the briefing room. Within the briefing room there was the ace of spades, as well as some lower numbered spades, as well as some clubs for good measure. At worst, diamonds and heart will have to come to their aid. Joker switched locations in the monitor to the water area. Filuru was standing up. Heart Shufflin pointed correctly, then quickly lent Filuru a shoulder. Alright. There was one reason for choosing Filuru as their negotiation partner, her grave injuries. They had to be careful not to let Filuru fall on the way to the negotiation, so they helped her walk. What would the other magical girls do? Joker checked the other magical girls' movements. Marika Fukuroi, Styler Mimi, Snow White. Then there was the tied-up and rolled water body. She wasn't moving at all. She viewed through the water area and the desert area in parallel. Back when Grimheart was here, she'd complain when Joker constantly switched screens. Now that she wasn't here, Joker could work more efficiently. She watched the water area magical girls while at the same time monitoring Filuru in the desert area. Filuru's magical skill has already been verified, knitting in threads. This was the second reason they chose Filuru. They only chose magical girls whose powers were clear to them. Naturally, they confirmed if she had any other weapons besides her needle and threads. They inspected every part of her body and clothes thoroughly. Even if she hid grenades, there was no way it wouldn't be discovered. During their inspection... Oh, you know what I think might be happening here? Styler Mimi can change people's appearances. They might have switched up who's tied up, who's going to negotiate. They could have Grimheart stuck in a room with Marika, and they could have the one tied up be the already injured Filuru. They could have switched everybody up during this. Okay, this is really creative. I just realized that Mimi can do that. Because I was thinking, like, how could Filuru be tricking them? What other power could Filuru have? But then I remembered it might not be Filuru that has another power. It could be Mimi using her power to change what they look like. That could be really cool. Okay. Naturally, they confirmed she had weapons other than threads. I read that. During their inspection, Filuru moaned when her wound had been pressed. Joker let out a sigh. For now, things were going well. However, she wasn't calm. It might just be a mood problem, but she still wasn't calm. If Grimheart hadn't sacrificed all the experiments, she might have been calmer. They should have allocated the Super I-Class magical girls as resources instead of relying on her feelings. Besides, more hard workers are always better, though she was thinking of such disgraceful things against her liege, so she switched back to the forest area. With spades on both sides, Filuru appeared from the bulkhead. Her complexion looked bad, but she was still a magical girl. She wouldn't die even if they pushed her with a bit more pressure. The Shufflins flanked her from both sides, taking her until she was 30 meters away from Grimheart, then placed their spears on her throat. They'd kill her immediately if she did anything suspicious. Besides Grimheart, the top 5 ranked hearts were surrounding her. If anything happened, they were told to act as her shield. Unlike the lower-ranked hearts, the upper ones were lacking in intelligence but full of bravery. Shufflin had no concept of life in the first place, as every one of them were Joker's subordinates. But the lower-ranked hearts tried to avoid death. They were afraid, selfishly thinking of self-preservation, though they were manageable. She watched the screen while occasionally switching to the water area. Nothing unexpected so far. Everything was proceeding smoothly. Grimheart released her powers and negotiations begun. Sorry, needed some water. We'll pass Deluge. We request our safety. She was fragile and weak. Joker didn't know if Filaru's voice would even reach Grim Heart. However, even if it didn't, it wasn't a problem for Grim Heart. The experimental body is necessary to me. If you hand it over, your sins are forgiven. Grim Heart believes everything except herself was rude. Grim Heart believes in her own claims of justice. Is someone who only pushed their own claims a fit person for negotiation? Her personality doesn't change despite canceling her own magic. I shall forgive your sins if you hand over the experimental body. I swear on my honor. Joker knew. She wasn't planning on keeping her promise. To Grim Heart, there was no need for nobles or wise people to keep promises toward enemies. While it was difficult to hear Filaru, she could still perceive her weak voice. Either way, she wanted a guarantee, or she won't deliver Deluge. Grim Heart talked about how honor was important. They were the same as two straight lines that wouldn't bend. Their desires were different from the start. Since Grim Heart went all the way from her base, she truly believed that her opponent would compromise. Knowing this, would Filaru not be desperate? Both of them continued negotiating, but Grim Heart never yawned, so she wasn't bored yet. Joker continued switching in the monitors, the tension remaining high. This is your last opportunity. I've given you many chances. Filaru came down. There was no escape now. Whether using her powers or not, it was a mistake for them to think they could negotiate with Grim Heart. Grim Heart activated her magical skill once more, and now negotiated one-sidedly. You know what would have been a really smart idea? To disguise one of... Actually, they might have done that. I was going to say to disguise one of them as Shufflin', but they actually could have done that. The one that's tied up could be a Shufflin' disguised as Deluge, and what if one of the Shufflin' is actually one of them? That could be a possibility. Filaru came down. There was no escape now. All of these things I'm saying are probably not going to happen, and I'm going to be like, well, it could have been really cool if this did happen. But, either way, Filaru came down. There was no escape now. Whether using her powers or not, it was a mistake for them to think they could negotiate with Grim Heart. Grim Heart activated her magical skill once more, and now negotiated one-sidedly. Filaru was still talking, but Grim Heart couldn't tell any more what she was saying. She was back to being unintelligible. Perhaps Grim Heart thought that she's completed her negotiations brilliantly, as she placed her throne back in her bag with a look of triumph. She huffed her chest and walked through the bulkhead. She felt like the summit was over. Grim Heart may be able to do blue-collar work, but manual labor was out of the question. Joker moved back to the forest area. At that time, she felt a sense of discomfort. She didn't understand right away why she was uncomfortable. The water area. The magical girls were sitting powerlessly as always, not concealing anything. Sometimes they'd lie down. Right now it seems that mounting an offense would be possible. She used the monitor to observe every part. She checked one by one, figuring out what was causing this strangeness. Was it just her imagination, or was it caused by something? Marika Fukuroy and Styler Mimi haven't done anything. No part of them was strange. Neither is Snow White. They were just sitting down. The experimental body, meanwhile, was tied and laid down. Joker stopped the camera there. The bulkhead to the briefing room was frozen. The ice was thick, and there was no sign of it melting. The surface wasn't wet. If they didn't touch it with their fingers, that ice would never melt. It was still low-temperatured. Something was wrong. Having the door frozen itself was fine. Barbarians would try to use the water to defend themselves by freezing it. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that the surface of the ice wasn't wet. With time passing and nothing done to it, shouldn't it be wetting due to the heat? So, if it was still being kept frozen, the water body was still using her powers, wasn't she? Oh, so maybe I'm right. Maybe she did switch them, and maybe it is potentially a Shufflin. Or maybe they just switched each other. But switching a Shufflin to look like Deluge and switching one of them to look like the Shufflin would be like mega cosmic brain plans. Something was wrong. Okay, she was still using her powers, wasn't she? Why was she cooperating with them and blocking the door if she was being captured? Doesn't the experimental body think these magical girls are trying to sell her off? Joker stood up and began to instruct the Shufflins. Oh, I love this. I think I'm onto something. I think Mimi might have switched some of their appearances. I think they're actually going to do this. Oh, I'm excited. Now we have Princess Deluge at the end of page 9. Snow White returned from the negotiations. From now on, it's a game of speed. Return from the negotiations. Okay, Snow White had the look of Feeleroo, and Feeleroo... Okay, so they did do it. Snow White had the look of Feeleroo, and Feeleroo had the look of Snow White. So Snow White was able to read her mind then. Ah, that's really, really good. And Feeleroo had the look of Snow White. Snow White placed Feeleroo into her 4D bag, since they had to take Feeleroo, who couldn't run due to all her injuries. The only way was to place her inside of her bag. They took the off the fake restraints from Deluge and ran. Okay. Marika Fukuroi and Sailor Mimi also ran. They had to get to the entrance before their enemies noticed or changed the password. They had to get there faster than the enemy could come, then seek out help. The only one who could negotiate with the enemy was Grim Heart. If they sent Joker, there was a risk of complete Shufflin annihilation, and the other Shufflins couldn't negotiate at all. If they asked for negotiations, the only person who could respond was Grim Heart. By asking for negotiations, they were also asking her to cancel out her magic temporarily. They also anticipated who they'd request for negotiations. Currently, the one of them with the least fighting capability was Feeleroo. She was the most heavily wounded of them all. Snow White replaced Feeleroo in advance. Snow White changed costumes, and Sailor Mimi made a genuine-looking scar on Snow White's belly. Then, using her powers, she made sure Snow White and Feeleroo's face was similar. Okay, this is really great, because I was thinking that they would switch somebody with Feeleroo like Marika or Deluge who could launch a surprise attack. But instead of launching a surprise attack, they switched them with Snow White so they could read her mind. I wasn't expecting that at all. So they made sure their face was similar. Since Feeleroo and Snow White's facial features look so similar, it wasn't hard. However, Feeleroo's current face was a bit more bruised. Snow White came in place of Feeleroo to negotiate, and went towards Grim Heart in order to negotiate. Grim Heart had to cancel her powers. Using this time, Snow White's powers now worked on Grim Heart. She was now able to hear the voice in her heart. Afterward, all that's left is to escape from the facility as quickly as possible. There was no time for Snow White and Feeleroo to switch clothes. They had to be fast, just run. All they need is to have speed. Deluge placed all her strength in her tired feet and dived into the bulkhead. She will survive. She promised Inferno that. Though she made that promise unilaterally, she still managed to keep it. And now we're jumping to Fall's point of view on page 11. Fall. Deluge had frozen the entrance to the briefing room. Now that Deluge was gone, she didn't know how long that magic would last. The ice will melt. Even if it would take 1 second to start melting, that's 1 second that shouldn't be wasted. Perhaps a minute or 2 minutes. They just have to earn enough time before their opponents can open the bulkhead. Marika Fukuroi was leading the charge. She ran as water splashed about her, splashing the people following behind her. However, Marika didn't much care for that. Ha ha ha, even retreating's part of the battle now. Oi! With one eye crushed by the Ace of Spades, her arm broken, her face completely bruised, she felt extremely energetic, as if she wasn't injured. In fact, her injuries really have started to disappear. With sunlight, water, and earth, her injuries can begin to heal. Since she received no sunlight, she's been healing slower. It's because she's basically a plant, Sailor Mimi would say. Hell yeah, it is. Marika would reply, smiling. She ate seeds as she ran, holding Inferno's crescent sword on her head. Solar cannon, she continued radiating heat to her huge sunflower on her head, and as the sunflower got hotter, it also got bigger. She pushed the panel of the bulkhead. Fall's radar began to respond. 3 magical girls in the hallways. 3 shufflins wielding spears. Marika pointed the top of her head to the hallways. Fire. They weren't even able to escape. There was nowhere for them to evade the light beam radiating from the sunflower. As the 3 shufflins were burnt away, the sunflower withered. Marika Fukuroi also ate some more seeds and then began growing sunflowers again. They assumed there would be guards. If those 3 were the only guards, then they should all be able to escape. Changing the password will take some time. Since they were moving at a magical girl's speed, the enemy was able to sense their movements, but they should be able to enter the 25-digit password before the enemy could change it, even with some shufflins blocking their way. Even though it looked like she had injuries, Snow White's injury was fake. It only looked like a deep gash due to Styler Mimi. However, Filaru's injuries were real. She couldn't heal by using water, earth, and sunlight like Marika could. All she could do for first aid was sewing. She'd have difficulty just running normally. However, they couldn't leave her. If they left her, she'd be killed by Grim Heart. Sorry, my throat has been getting so dry recording stuff lately. They took her together, but not letting her go on foot. That would give Grim Heart a hint of how gravely injured she was. Snow White placed Filaru inside the bag on her waist. That was how Grim Heart hid her shufflins. Even if they were living creatures, they could be placed in the bag, and they were also able to get out freely of their own will. This way, you could carry both heavy objects or seriously injured people. No magical girls detected, Fall told the search results. Then they continued running again. Their enemies should have been checking the monitors now, knowing that they'd go for the entrance. The enemies should know what they're about to do. Before the enemies could change the password or send more reinforcements, they had to open the doors quickly. They ran across the hallways, and when they headed to the desert room, they had to wait as the bulkhead began opening. When it opened just a little bit, in that instant, Fall would detect any magical girls on the other side. Desert room magical girls detected 15. When the door opened, they entered the desert room. They saw no shufflins in their sight. They couldn't see them, but Fall was certain there were 15 magical girls here. That was a fact. Were they hiding in the area? They wouldn't have enough space to fit 15 people in a hallway. Maybe they were moving faster than he expected. Fall's words were able to show more of his reactions than facial expressions ever could, and the magical girls kept running. Marika Fukuroi, who was in water before, was now running in sand. The 15 magical girls are bundled up in the bulkhead, their moving pone. They could see them as they reached the sand hills. It was a mixture of clubs and spades, spread out and holding weapons. Just seeing how they protected the bulkheads made it clear what they were doing. Solar cannon. Seeing the enemy, Marika immediately fired. This was different than back in the corridors. This time the enemies were spread out. 2 shufflins were completely baked, but that was enough to open a path. They quickly slid past them and pressed the panel, but the door won't slide open. The magical girls took stances to intercept the shufflin, heading after them. Magical girl detected. They've increased. 4 in the hallways pone. Snow White parried the spears with ruler. Deluge spun her trident around, creating frost where it spun. The moment the shuffling attacks had stopped, Snow White slid through the bulkhead. Then Deluge, then Mimi. But Marika didn't try to go inside the bulkhead. There's so many of them. This is gonna be fun. Stellar Mimi clicked her tongue, then returned to the desert. Now they had 2 magical girls guarding their back. It's up to Snow White and Deluge to proceed forward. Deluge shone a bright blue light and proceeded. So I guess maybe she's going into princess mode or whatever? Deluge was going to pierce her enemies with her trident. Before she saw the girl in front of her, a girl appeared literally out of nowhere, popping out of thin air. Everyone was stunned. Deluge muttered out, "Prism... Oh, shit! No! Oh my god! Oh my god, it's Prism... It wasn't... Oh my god. So was Stunt Chica dead then? But it wasn't Stunt Chica, unless Stunt Chica was the other girl laying there, and she's alive too, but Prism... Oh my god, there's Prism Cherry. What the hell? Prism Cherry, you're alive. Sorry I'm late, but there's something I have to do. With her sparkling and shining tail, Prism Cherry passed Princess Deluge and Snow White and entered the desert area as it closed. Styler Mimi. I'm friendly. I have to keep reading. I can't stop for water. I'm friendly. A voice... I am so hype right now. I almost started tearing up there. Oh my god, Prism Cherry's alive. A voice she's never heard before just declared herself as friendly, which made Mimi confused. The magical girl that came at her direction from the closed-off bulkhead was a magical girl that she's never seen before and was strangely sparkling. Friendly. Hell yeah. Marika shouted out. Why did she accept her so easily? I love Mimi's like, really? Mimi couldn't even mutter out those words. There were 13 shufflin, waving their weapons around them. Even with this magical girl who was now their self-proclaimed ally, Marika's flower will take time to bloom. If they'd just gone in the hallways, it'd have been easier to fight. But Marika chose to come out here. How did she even estimate this? The Shufflin also seemed to be flustered at the addition of this mysterious new magical girl. While they were running with their weapons, they stopped for just a moment. At that moment, the mysterious magical girl shouted, "Don't look at me." There was a light. She told them not to look, so Mimi didn't know exactly what it was, but it was bright. The bright light that was radiating caused the Shufflin to cover their eyes. Since Mimi and Marika was in front of the light source, they were still fine. Mimi swung her scissors and kicked away the Shufflin. She managed to parry one, and then dodge one, and another, and another. There were too many. Inevitably, her hairpiece was hit by a mace, and her right arm was scratched by a spear. She felt the cut in her skin and meat, and the pain lingered. She was forced to block all the spears with her right arm, causing her blood to splatter. She threw off her scissors so that she could gain some distance. She was doing an awkward battle. There was no reason for her to be pushed back by numbers alone. The magical girl behind her stood her ground, not willing to move. While avoiding the Shufflin's attacks, the magical girl behind her began attacking back. Why was she protecting and fighting alongside magical girls she just met? Marika Fukuroi laughed. She wasn't just pleased with all this fighting. Mimi had heard this laughter before. "It's the sun! Yahoy!" Ah, I see now. It wasn't just the warmth of the light that was dazzling. The light was sunlight itself. It was necessary for Marika Fukuroi, yet she came all the way underground. Oh, because she can reflect anything she wants, including sunlight. Yet she came all the way underground. She had received sunlight now, and more than that, she had a magical girl radiating that sunlight intensely behind her back. Mimi was planning to buy time until Marika's flowers bloomed. It was Mimi's job to buy that time for that selfishly poisonous girl. Her job ended instantly. It wasn't just the warmth. That light was the real, blinding light of the sun. The sunflower bulged at an explosive speed, glowing brighter as it did. Solar heaven. Mimi knew what was about to happen. Marika also knew that Mimi would tell her newly designated ally what would happen. Mimi instantly tackled the new ally they had, covering her body down in the sand. Light began to shoot out. This wasn't the mysterious magical girl's sunlight. The light continued to accumulate slowly until Marika released the energy she had stored up to her limits. Mimi spat out the sand in her mouth. "You're always like this." "Thanks for the compliments." This is so great. And now we have sparkling, shining Marika as an illustration. This is so good. That wasn't a compliment. "Hey, gotta thank our new buddy over there too." "Huh? Oh, okay, I'm glad I was useful." Marika had dragged Mimi into this, and now Mimi was saving this mysterious magical girl. The entirety of Marika's surroundings turned to black. As for the Shufflins, there was no need to even think about what happened to them. "Hey, you need to tell me all about you later." "Oh, okay. For now, let's go after the magical girl hunter. You need to stop being so casual about the..." She saw sand floating in the distance from the mountains. Over there a body was moving. Mimi crouched down, placing sand in her palms, then threw it all on Marika. Stellar Mimi's magical skill was the ability to alter someone's body. However, it's not just for attire. She could also disguise someone as someone else, or give them perfect camouflage. Marika was covered completely in sand. Then the mysterious magical girl would be next, all given completely perfect sand camouflages. It wasn't just normal camouflage, it was perfect. It looked like the real thing. Aw, Mimi's probably gonna sacrifice herself. The girl was probably Ace of Spades, wasn't it? It looked just like the real thing. Stellar Mimi's magical skill allowed her to deceive even the eyesight of a magical girl. Next, she'll have to cover herself, but the sandy dust came in first. The Ace of Spades was leading it, the King and Queen of Clubs following behind. "I won't make..." She was stabbed, the throat. She was turned around. She was thrown. Hot, blood, overflowing from the back of her neck, flowing down her mouth. It felt like she'd been cut 1,000 times, yet her consciousness still remained. She couldn't breathe. It was painful. It hurts. She was always the same. Sorry, my throat is so dry. No matter how much danger there was, Marika Fukuroi would always be Marika Fukuroi. No matter how much Stellar Mimi refused, she'd always drag her along. Stellar Mimi would reject, and she'd ignore it and bring her along anyway. The desert was turning red. That was all she could see. She didn't know how Marika and the other person were doing. It was painful. It hurts. Why'd that idiot still want to fight despite these odds? Mimi really hated going with her. She'd have abandoned her right then. Mimi realized that. Okay. Or if Mimi really hated going with her, she'd have abandoned her right there. Mimi realized that. Marika Fukuroi would never really invite someone who was seriously against it. Even though Mimi would sometimes go, at her, sometimes she'd see that Marika really cared for people. Mimi knew this too. Mimi also knew that she didn't really hate going with her. What Mimi hated was how Marika kept going to all these places. Somehow she'd always come back safe. No matter how much she fought, she'd always come back home safely. This time it's different. She didn't really think it would be this different. Dangerous, scary, that would be a good way to say it, but she was always convinced they'd return safely. There was no power left in her. That's why in the end she squeezed out the last of it. She took out her scissors from her sleeves. Took out the scissors from her sleeves and threw it back at the clubs that threw her body. It was an unexpected throw. She didn't even aim it. It pierced the shufflin directly in the throat. The queen of clubs fell down while scratching at her throat. Mimi was on her back looking at the ceiling. She was out of time. This is good though, without anybody for Joker to restock. The more they take out, that's the less they have to fight. And now we're seeing it from Marika's point of view. She was like a quadrupedal beast lying on all fours in the desert. She killed any signs of her own presence. Mimi wasn't moving. She took the shufflin that threw her along with her. Taking her along, this was companionship, but taking Mimi along had caused her to be killed. And Mimi herself took the shufflin with her. They both weren't moving. Mimi had suffered fatal injuries, fatal wounds. Marika couldn't save her. Did she not even try to save her? No, she couldn't save her, but she should have saved her. Why is she thinking about all these things? Why is she thinking of the dead in the middle of a fight? The Ace of Spades and the King of Clubs were wielding their weapons, standing back to back. They haven't noticed her yet. Her new ally was also holding her breath, remembering not to move at all. While standing back to back, the two shufflin began moving little by little, their footprints leaving trace marks in the sand. The two of them were headed for the bulkhead. Mimi was there. Mimi. It was Mimi. Styler Mimi. Marika Fukuroi was still thinking of Styler Mimi. She shouldn't be thinking of someone who wasn't moving on the ground. Fighting was fun. Even losing one was fun. She should be thinking of her enemies with all her might, but she couldn't think of them. All her thoughts were dyed up. How could she defeat them? How should she defend against them? Those thoughts normally dissolve when she was in battle. Her focus was purely on the enemy. She wouldn't even consider that she was fighting two opponents. She'd just think she was fighting one big battle. She couldn't poison her mind with anything else, yet Mimi had died. Her mind won't leave that thought. She couldn't even think of battle. Her ally had fallen. She wasn't moving, and she won't be able to move forever. It wasn't unusual of her to see people dying. Anyone who could be disturbed by such a trivial matter was unsuited for battle, and shouldn't be called a warrior. She'd be laughed at. She'd be laughed at by the magical girl hunter, the forest musician, and Malpam. Malpam had died. She shouldn't have been able to die, even if someone tried to kill her. Malpam was supposed to be eternal. Marika thought she'd be able to play with her, and that Marika would be the one to die first. Malpam had died. Mimi couldn't move. Marika had brought Mimi along by force, even though she said she hated it. What was she thinking? She hated it and I still brought her? But why am I thinking this now? Then it sprang out from the bottom of her heart, a small wave turning into a huge tsunami. All of Marika Fukuroi's remaining energy attempted to overflow. Power. This pure power was trying to change Marika. Sometimes, when a magical girl was completely focused on something, they can achieve rapid growth. That's what Malpam had taught her. That was over 10 years ago. It was a miracle that Marika still remembered. She wondered if she knew what was going to happen. Mimi had died. Mimi had been killed. She was protecting Marika, but no. Marika only kept telling herself things she wanted to hear. This is something you can only win with your own power. The last thing that Mimi did was camouflaging her using her powers. She can do this now. She didn't need anything else. She didn't have to have anything else. Her nose was sniffling. Was this because she had died? There was no logical reasoning for it, but her feelings seemed to understand. Mimi took out a shufflin with her, leaving only 2 shufflin that Marika had to defeat. Marika wasn't dead. Malpom was dead. Mimi was dead. But Marika was still alive. The overflowing power springing up from Marika spread to her limbs. It made her weakening heart stronger. She was trying to persuade her entire body. Now's the time to win on her own power. Come on, wake up. No, it's none of your business. You don't need anything to win. Hurry up and go home already. She was quieting down her heart, ensuring that her thoughts don't rampage in her mind. In the middle of a fight, you need to quiet down your heart. Suppress the will to beat down her opponent. Do not make a single trace in the sand. Do not make a single noise. Lighten your weight, soft as a feather, faster than a feather. She had practiced her stealth movements the way that Melville taught her, sneaking up on the 2 shufflin. She moved faster than her opponent could perceive, never even letting them notice. Slowly, she ate a seed. Her saliva was inconvenient to her. Her throat was sore. There's no more sunlight. This won't bloom quickly. She had to buy time, taking advantage of her camouflage until her flower bloomed. The Ace of Spades outclassed the best of the best in Mao's school in physical abilities, but only in physical abilities. Marika knew this because she was one of the best in Mao's school when it came to physical abilities. However, you needed to use your powers to win as well. She moved like a turtle on all 4s, but her speed made it so that she reached the bulkhead before the enemy did. She had to crush the club shuffling first. She had to move the Ace of Spades away from the bulkhead and earn some time. All right, bring it on, she muttered to herself as the 2 shufflin slightly deviated from the bulkhead. They haven't noticed her yet. If they did notice her, she'd resort to a more simple way of attacking. She left the shufflin alone as she waited in front of the bulkhead, wondering what they'd do. They approached Mimi's fallen body. When Marika realized what it was that they were doing, however, she completely erased the memory of her hiding spot and shouted. Mimi had already de-transformed back to a human. She died as a stab wound was penetrated into her neck. Although she had died a gruesome death, she closed her eyes with a peaceful look on her face. The 2 shufflin grabbed both halves of Mimi's body and ripped her corpse in half, then swayed it away, blood scattering where it flew. It wasn't just blood, but Mimi's body parts were scattered. The entire area was dyed red. So was Marika. So was the other magical girl that was hiding. Now her camouflage served no purpose as it was dyed red. The clubs headed toward her. The spade headed towards her ally. Her ally stood up, her face invisible from the camouflage. Marika punched the clubs, then dodged a blow. She was headed toward the expressionless spades. Before the club swung her mace at Marika's head, cracking her forehead. Her vision became red. The spade stabbed the spear at her ally, and Marika shouted out. Her ally was losing power. The spade pulled her spear away. There was a lot of blood on the tip. The club swung her mace again, but this time Marika pounded her forehead against it. Blood flew off. The clubs lost her balance, making it the right time for Marika to punch her back. The clubs bent down, but she didn't fall. Instead, she tackled Marika. Marika used her elbow to strike at her spine, twice, 3 times, yet the clubs didn't fall. The spade was rushing toward her at a speed where Marika couldn't react. The clubs instantly dodged away from the spade's spear, causing it to be plunged into Marika's chest. She could feel the meat of her skin splitting up as it did. Blood overflowed, but at that time a light shone. It was the light she was bathed in before, sunlight. The magical girl that the spades had stabbed before, the one that collapsed. She held a large mirror and turned it toward Marika. In the mirror, Marika saw the sun reflected back at her, a dazzling light that couldn't be seen directly. Marika remembered that feeling. Marika pulled the spades closer to her, pushing the spear deeper, tearing apart more skin. She grabbed the spade's shoulders, then pulled her in like a hug, causing the spear tip to burst out of Marika's back. The spades tried to get away, but it was too late. As she was bathed in the light of the sun, several yellow flowers bloomed on her head. Genocide Orca. Reddish-purple thorns popped out of her entire body, thick, sharp, fully capable of piercing through a magical girl's body. She stabbed both the clubs and the spades. She stabbed the spades with multiple thorns. It pierced through her frontal lobe, through her eyes. It finally crushed her brain, breaking the ace's cranium. The Shufflin's blood mixed with Marika's. The light of the sun disappeared. Her ally dropped the mirror. Marika had defeated the two Shufflins. Man, I'm tired. She wanted to rest just for a little bit. When she wakes up, it'll be a new fight. As she thought of that, Marika Fukuroi lost consciousness. Man, that's probably the hardest death this series. Or this, volume. Try not to cough. I've drank nearly that entire cup of water, and still it feels like I have breathed in a desert. So yeah. Damn. That is the hardest death so far this arc, though. I think. I don't know. Inferno's was kind of hard, I think. It's sad, though, to bring Prism Cherry back like that just to have her die again so quickly. I don't know. Maybe she makes it. Who knows? But we have Fall now. I doubt it, though. I think they've both died. Though I could see them having an excuse for Marika living, though, because of the sunlight. But either way. Fall. Snow White was able to hear the hearts of cyber fairies as well. It was a bit embarrassing, but in a fight she'd be able to consult with Fall without even speaking to him, which was a huge plus. There were 3 Shufflins in the hallways, 2 hearts and a 6 of spades. Snow White threw her magical phone and slid it across the floor, with Fall setting his maximum stereoscopic image size. With a large image of Fall suddenly appearing, added to the large volume that was at max, Fall began shouting. The one who ignored Fall was the spade Shufflin, which was easily dispatched by a single slice from Ruler. The hearts behind them were too scared to react, so both Snow White and Deluge kicked one. Snow White picked up the magical phone. She jumped on the walls, then kicked with enough force to launch her to the next bulkhead panel, using her shoulder to push it. No one's here. Now's the time, Pone. They were probably focusing all their fighting power on them, but it won't be empty forever. The Shufflins keeping guard in the briefing room were a number that couldn't be cut down. Added with Grimheart, this could easily be game over for them. Although Snow White already figured out Grimheart's power, not even Snow White could hope to challenge Grimheart to a polite battle. The 2 magical girls continued running in the hallways. Snow White had already told Fall the combination, and Fall saved it in his memory. Fall's memory being digitally stored meant it couldn't be wrong. 284739286903619483678778709. Password authenticated, opening bulkhead. They made it in time. The password still hasn't changed. A woman's voice authenticated the password. A door much thicker and heavier than the bulkheads began sliding upward. Deluge sighed out loud. Even though it's not the time to feel relieved, Fall understood how Deluge could be relieved now. Even Fall knew that he's passed through the biggest difficulty. After they go outside, they can contact someone. Then every absurd thing in this facility will come to light. There really were so many things that happened. There were many who died, and those who survived had been heavily injured, both physically and mentally. Even Snow White, who seemed to have a calm face, was probably not so calm on the inside. Just hearing the voices of everyone's hearts during this entire incident, Fall noticed that Snow White's heart rate had increased by triple. If they get out, Fall will make sure to care for Snow White's own heart and support her in the future. He needed to tell her that Snow White was never alone, but she's always been unreasonably stubborn at that. Then there were the man-made magical girls. From now on, they're going to have to discuss these man-made magical girls with Fall's information network. They should be able to... Password changed, canceling unlocking procedure. They heard the voice of the woman again, and Deluge tried to grab onto the door. However, a magical girl's arm strength wouldn't be enough to lift this door. There was barely enough room to slide in. The password had changed. Now the door wouldn't open. Snow White placed Ruler in the gap between the bulkhead and the door. Since Ruler could never be broken, the door could never crush it. They heard the crunching noise that the door made as it tried to close. However, the door itself wasn't widening. There wasn't enough space to slide a girl's body through. They can't slip through like this. Deluge, I'm gonna need you to stay put. Snow White opened her bag, and Deluge had a surprised look on her face as Snow White placed the mouth of the bag on Deluge's head, continuing all the way to her foot, completely placing her in the bag. Fall understood what Snow was doing. Snow White slid the bag with Deluge across the floor, past the door. Even though magical girls couldn't slip through, the 4D bag would be able to slip through. She pulled out Ruler from the door, this time letting it close. While sighing out, Snow White returned the way she came, running at the same momentum, fall side out as well. In the end, In the end, we'll still be together, Pone. It's okay. We just have to buy some time with Marika, Mimi, and Prism Cherry. Reinforcements will come. Don't worry. Of course I worry. Wait, only one magical girl detected. Just you, Snow White. And now we have Filuru. By the time Filuru was pulled out of the bag, she was already in front of a ladder. Filuru was being carried on Deluge's back as the ladder climbed up the ladder. When she activated her magical phone, she saw that she had received signal. Now she can call for help. Her former bosses, her colleagues, the tea club magical girls, the karaoke magical girls, the mahjong magical girls, the camping magical girls, the gardening magical girls, pretty much any magical girls possible. Her job hunting activities weren't useless after all. Snow White, Marika Fukuroi, Stellar Mimi, she had their numbers as well. She sent text to all of them that she was okay. Now that she sent the information, Grimheart could no longer hide. They had crushed her intentions. When she climbed up the ladder, they arrived back at the factory. Broken cranes, marks of destruction, dust, rust, the cubicle, everything was nostalgic. Her stomach still felt sore. So sorry about that. I was able to save right before my computer died. And I'm really glad I did, because I noticed, oh, my battery's getting low, I better save before I continue reading. And it just happened to work out so that I was able to do it, and my computer died really right afterward. And if I would have lost all of that I was reading, that would have been oh man, that would have been the worst. So yeah, I've done all of that so far, and we're currently at page 28, I believe. Yeah, we are. So I'm going to finish reading from exactly where I left off before taking this jump cut. Again, super sorry about that. But yeah, I'll talk about my thoughts at the end of it instead of it now, but it's really good. Just let me finish the arc. I've been waiting to finish since leaving to go charge my computer. I was at this paragraph. When she climbed up the ladder, they arrived back at the factory. Broken cranes, marks of destruction, dust, rust, the cubicle. Everything was nostalgic. Her stomach still felt sore. When she sighed out, she was almost about to cry. They weren't tears of pain, they were tears of joy. She's finally out. I'm sorry, could you put me down? Are you sure? You're hurt, are you sure? I think I'm good to go. I had a long rest in the bag. Marcus fruit helped as well. You mean that thing? It's pretty effective, isn't it? She was still in pain, but despite that, she was happier now. Filuru looked at Deluge. She was crying with a smile. She grabbed her right hand, firmly grasping it. She couldn't believe that they fought on the roof of that building yesterday. Back then, she felt like she had to capture Deluge, but now, she was grateful that Deluge was very kind. Filuru bit her lower lip. Honestly, she didn't want to cry now. She still had the pride of being the leading magical girl right here. Let's go. Okay. It was night outside. Did time not pass while they were underneath? Or could it really have been more than 24 hours? There was no way left to verify it now. The only one that could was back inside. She promised that she'd divide the rewards to 3, but she couldn't do that either. Udakata and Kafuria would probably complain. Filuru began to think of apologies. She could afford to think about that now. Deluge and Filuru tried to run, but then clang, they heard a noise. They heard it coming from the hot water supply room. What was that? Footsteps continued. Someone was here. The face popping out from the door was a Shufflin. However, they were relieved that it was a Heart Shufflin. Heart Shufflin had no combat abilities. All they did was be afraid and be pathetic. Shufflins were all enemies. Still, back then, Shufflins were once allies too. Kafuria had once comforted a Shufflin before. She's wiped the tears of a Shufflin with handkerchiefs once too. Yeah, that was a thing once. Filaru had already clenched her fist. "If you don't do anything, we won't do anything. If you let us pass, we'll let you be." Deluge stabbed her trident to the hearts, piercing through the Shufflin's body. Filaru looked shocked. The heart's costume began to rip, and underneath it was a 10 of spades. The spades was wearing a heart's costume on top of her own. The spades was filled with malice. They had thought of trapping them by acting as hearts. That would be known as weak. Filaru staggered, elbowing one of the levers of the crane. However, the Shufflin slid past her attack, approaching her. Then the Shufflin stabbed her spear at Filaru's abdomen. Snow White's outfit now had a hole in it, flowing red with blood that wouldn't stop. Deluge cried out. Filaru felt like this girl had seen nothing but despair. In the end, Filaru couldn't help anyone. However, she did what she needed to do, and that was enough. So now, Filaru's dying like it's nothing. But now we're going to Shufflin. Let's just see how it ends. Grimheart couldn't speak much of how angry she was. She only trembled her fists in anger. The 4 of hearts that saw her could only tremble as she was beaten repeatedly. They failed to change the password in time. If they wanted to change the password, they needed Grimheart to know the previous one. As they were aware of Snow White, the magical girl hunter, their plan to forget the password as soon as they changed it backfired. The magical girls have escaped the facility. Grimheart couldn't fulfill her purpose. Grimheart kicked up the stationaries and pushed the panel of the bulkhead as soon as they dropped on the floor. She exited the briefing room to chase after the escaped magical girls. Joker saw her from behind. Grimheart wouldn't make it in time. The magical girls were free. They couldn't keep them confined any longer. The Shufflin slowly followed Grimheart. Grimheart had forgotten her noble behavior, walking as fast as possible. Joker had predicted this till the very end. Grimheart was useless. Following her would just lead to ruin. No matter where she went, there would be no end in sight. Where did she go wrong? Shufflins were powerful. Grimheart was even more powerful. However, they've escaped. They underestimated the magical girl hunter. Or perhaps it wasn't just the magical girl hunter, but they underestimated all magical girls. She sighed out as she looked at the monitor. At the same time, a bitter smile leaked out. It was strange to see Grimheart panicking, followed by the Shufflins. Joker would also have to follow Grimheart till the very end. It won't be such a bad thing to follow her to ruin. That may end up happening. Okay, so that's the end. Don't know what's going to happen in the epilogue, but I should end the video here. First, to discuss it though, this is one of the sadder endings. I think that this arc is definitely up there with Unmarked for me though. Not anywhere near Restart, because Restart, every death, every storyline just felt so important. With this, there aren't any deaths where I'm like, oh, that's BS, or oh, she really, really shouldn't have died, like with a lot of limited BS deaths. But I also feel like Prism Cherry dying after just coming back like that, I don't know. It wasn't terrible. Again, I'm not saying she should have definitely lived, but at the same time, I feel like it maybe would have been better if she didn't die so easily. And so like nonchalantly after coming back and being that big of a deal. And the same goes for Filaru dying here. I feel like Filaru dying here is something that maybe she just shouldn't have. It seems a little bit pointless. Maybe she should have just stayed alive. So yeah, because her staying alive as well, again, I'm not 100% certain she died, but I'm pretty sure she did. But Filaru staying alive gives Deluge this ability to tell her story and connect back with the Land of Magic. So, I don't know. I feel like Prism Cherry and Filaru's deaths leave a bad taste in my mouth, but all the other deaths here toward the end were really good and really impactful and emotional. Some of the ones earlier in the arc weren't really. Utakata and Kafuria died a bit too easy, in my opinion. And like with the other pure elements and stuff, they had stories going on, but they weren't as deep and developed as other characters from the first 2 arcs. And their deaths weren't, again, as big a moment as they should have been, really. Like, this is a character that we've seen from their perspective and learned their story dying, but they just kind of died like, oh, well, yeah, they're dead now. and there wasn't a big deal made about it like the first two arcs did when a character died, which is what kind of made it great because all of the characters were important and vital, where this arc had characters like Umbrain and Lady Proud really didn't feel that important. It felt like they were there, they served their role, they died, oh well, whatever. But I don't really see many people being like, oh yeah, Umbrain or Lady Proud, their story was great, because they didn't really have much of a story there. So yeah, I think that it's on par because there's some really good things about it. It's about on par with Unmarked. It's really good. I really enjoyed reading it, but it wasn't perfect. We're gonna have to see what the epilogue is, though. I'm thinking maybe we'll get more reveals for what we're gonna be going into for the next arc and what's going on with like Flen, the other characters there, and Pithy Frederica and all that. So I'm not sure, but I'm thinking Ripple maybe was pulled back through and Ripple is Stunt Chica, but I'm hoping that Stunt Chica was just Stunt Chica. If so, and if she did actually die, that's kind of a low-profile death for her, but either way. Yeah, anything else? I don't know. I really liked it all. And so that leaves us with the two bad guys still living, which I had been saying pretty much the whole time. I thought they would still live. If anything, this Joker Shufflin would die, and there would just be another Joker Shufflin. So basically, she would die, but not really die. So both of them came out of it okay. Snow White was trapped in there last time we saw her, but again, I'm assuming Snow White's going to be fine. And Deluge survived, which, again, I was like, one of the pure elements has to live. One of the man-made magical girls has to live. And she ended up being the last one left. I was thinking it could be her or Inferno. Really didn't want Inferno to die either, but Deluge is the survivor. And I was kind of thinking Filuru was okay there toward the end, but it seems like they just went, oh no, we need to find a way to kill her off too. So I don't know. I don't know if Filuru is going to survive this or not. Doesn't look like she is, but either way, I'm going to end it here, and I'm going to have my last video next time doing the epilogue. Also, I looked at the, the sketchbook thing, and I thought it was going to be like images that were like supposed to be images that she had drawn or whatever, and it was going to be feelsy and cool, but it's just one illustration. So yeah, I'm not going to do anything special on that because there's nothing special to do on that. But yeah, so I'll be back with the last video for this arc next week. Then I guess the week after that, I don't know if I'm going to spend, and I'm going to take a week off and spend that extra week to work on it, but I want to do an updated favorite characters video, of course, like I usually do. I didn't do one after Limited, but I want to do one now, so I'm going to have an updated favorite characters video, and that might be the week after next, or I might take a week off just to have extra time to work on it so I can add pictures and everything, and then just have it the Tuesday after that. Then we'll go straight from there. I'll do my character design reactions like usual for the next arc. Episodes isn't next. I think next we're going straight into Aces. After Aces we have episodes, then Peaceful Days, and then we're going to get into Queens, and we'll be all caught up, and I'll kind of have nothing to make weekly videos on except for like, I can do like some reviews or some character videos here and there, but I probably won't be doing weekly videos like this anymore once we catch up. So I'm just going to take my time, read at my own leisurely pace for the channel, because I don't know, I kind of don't want to just bust through it, then catch up and be like, oh yeah, no more videos, I guess. So yeah, that's the plans for the future. Either way though, I'm rambling on, so I'm going to end it. Like if you did like the video, comment down there to tell me what you thought of this chapter. Sorry my voice has been dying basically the whole time. Comment to tell me what you thought of the chapter, what you thought of my thoughts and reactions to it. Subscribe for more. Magical Girl Raising Project, much more on the channel. Follow on Twitter if you want. I can try to keep you updated there and stuff for the channel, or talk to you there. And if you want a link to our Discord server to talk to me or more of us on Discord about this series or anything else, just ask and I can give you a link. That's it. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you all next time.